Alright, thank you guys for tuning in to Bootz Sports Show. I'm your host, Bootz, and today I'm going to do something a little bit different. Today I'm calling this my special Around the League edition show, where what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the most compelling story or storyline in each division and go down and talk about what I deem is the most important story going throughout the National Football League. I will also be doing a first today. I got an email at my bootsports@yahoo.com, which you can also use to bring up subjects, ask questions, make comments, challenge any opinions that I may have about anything that I've said in previous shows or current shows. Once again, that email address is bootsports@yahoo.com. I will be revealing that email and reading it on the show, and you can hear my thoughts on it. Today I'm going to start talking about, once again, just go throughout the league, talk about what's the most important storyline to me in the league. And then I will also do my MVP candidates and my favorite and why I picked that favorite. So let's get started right now. In the NFC East, I think the most compelling storyline is probably everybody's storyline. It's RG3. I think his impact on the National Football League has been unbelievable, and I don't think most of the people or the media pundits that have covered him or studied him believe that he had the talent to be this effective, this efficient, this early in his career. He's been more than what most people thought he would be. Awesome arm, awesome legs, can run around the field as well. But the most important thing to me, it's tough because I'm a diehard Cowboy fan, but I like RG3 because he sounds intelligent, he acts intelligent, he is intelligent. And you can tell right away when he's talking that he came from a good upbringing, and he's a hard guy not to like. So welcome to the league. Unfortunately, you're in the NFC East and the Cowboys, and we'll have to deal with you for the next 10, 15 years, who knows how long. But he's a welcome addition to the league. I think it's a good product, a good player that most people can root for, not just Redskins fans. My next storyline is the NFC North, and it's disappointing Detroit. And last year, when you saw some of the players and you looked at the talent they had on the field, you know, acquiring guys in the draft like Nick Fairley and Ndamukong Suh, and re-signing Stephen Tulloch, their middle linebacker, you know, and they put together a pretty good, a solid group of players. Obviously, they have Calvin Johnson, aka Megatron, on the other side of the ball with Matt Stafford. But their quarterback play hasn't been as productive, or they haven't had a productive outing from the quarterback position. They haven't scored as many touchdowns as they did, and they don't look like the same team that they looked like last year. Definitely they regressed, and a lot of people would have picked them to make the playoffs this year. They had a lot of games last year, the Detroit Lions, where they were down in games, and they came back miraculously, even down 4 scores and in games, came back and won. They haven't been as lucky in those types of games this year. They've been close in games, but they just haven't been able to put it together. So they're my disappointment, my big storyline in the NFC North. Moving ahead to the NFC South, you have to admire what the Atlanta Falcons are doing. Now, I know a lot of you people are saying, let's not put the cart before the horse with this team. Well, I'm not saying they're going to win a Super Bowl, but I think they're as good as any team in the National Football League right now. I think this will be the year that you'll see Matt Ryan finally win his first playoff game. This team has weapons all over the field. I like the acquisition of Asante Samuel, who will be a Hall of Fame, or should be a Hall of Fame cornerback in the future. They have a presence on defense. Their linebacking core is solid. And most of all, they have the weapons on offense to move the ball up and down the field, and they can keep the clock moving with Michael Turner. This is a team that, remember, they did lose to the Giants and only scored 2 points in that playoff game last year, but they lost on the road. They will most likely have a home game this year. They will have a home game this year, but They're very good at home. I think they're like 24-5 or 24-4 at home with Matt Ryan at quarterback. They're very tough to beat in Atlanta. So don't count this team out yet. Going forward to the NFC West, this division had a bunch of storylines that I could have went with, but I tried to go with one here that maybe not a lot of people, or I definitely haven't heard people talk about in the mainstream media, and that's the St. Louis Rams. Now you're probably saying, why is this guy talking about the St. Louis Rams? Well, the reason why I'm talking about him is because I just mentioned RG3, and the Rams could have had RG3 on their team. Instead, they received picks from the Washington Redskins and allowed them to take that second pick, in which they knew, the Rams knew that that pick would either end up being RG3 or Andrew Luck. The Rams would look like a different team right now with RG3. The Rams they're very close to 500. They're almost there with a playoff push. They were right there. No question in my mind what RG3 would look like in a Rams uniform on turf. Would be a very explosive player, and it would change the he's one of those players, RG3, and I know I talked about him earlier. He's one of those players that makes everybody better. There's no question that the Rams might want to look and say, wow, what could we have had here with RG3? And yeah, and he's already put together a better season than Bradford's ever put together since he's been in the league. So what could it have been with RG3 being a Ram? My next division as we move over to the AFC is the AFC East, and I can't help but not talk about the New York Jets. I mean, we all remember Rob Ryan to start the season said this was the most talented Jets team that he's ever had. And looking at the talent level, they did take some hits on defense, but their biggest hit wasn't the losses of Darrelle Revis, wasn't the losses of some key defensive players. Their big hit to me was the regression of their quarterback, Mark Sanchez. Now, the coaching staff made some poor coaching decisions, and we can talk about Stephen Hill being selected and them trading up to get Stephen Hill and possibly could have brought another player that could have helped them. But my problem isn't that. My problem is when this week we watched the Tennessee Titans versus the New York Jets. And in that, Mark Sanchez looked right away like he wasn't going to be able to put the team in winning situations via throwing the football. He threw the first interception. You said, okay, whatever. The second interception, after that second interception, the Jets were still within reach. And this is a bad football team we're talking about here, the Titans. We're not talking about it, like they were playing against a very good football team. But the Jets, I thought after that second interception had an opportunity to prove the reason that they brought Tim Tebow in here. Now, before you guys, flame me about Tim Tebow is not a great quarterback. He's not the best quarterback in the world. But he is no worse and has proven in the NFL to not be worse than Mark Sanchez. I thought that was the reason that you traded those couple draft picks away to Denver to bring in Tim Tebow, so he can rekindle maybe or possibly. I mean, you're not going to win with Mark. Maybe this kid can conjure up that magic that he brought up with the Denver Broncos last year, winning a playoff game. Because if you look at the Jets' schedule, the Jets only had to beat the Tennessee Titans, which were a losing football team, the Jacksonville Jaguars, a losing football team, and the Buffalo Bills. Those are 3 losing football teams with losing records that you would think that with a decent quarterback, the Jets would be able to win those 3 games. And had they done that, they most likely would have made the playoffs. But they never went back to Mark Sanchez. Now, I'm sorry, they never went back to Tim Tebow. I would have just liked to seen them try to turn the keys over to this kid and give him a chance to see if he could rekindle some of that magic that happened in Denver. So I thought that was a bad coaching move, because if you weren't going to play him there, then why did you bring him here? because all it did was cause controversy at the quarterback position and directly could have affected the way Mark played this year and could be the reason why he regressed so much. But moving on to the AFC North, the division has a lot of similar talent, but I chose to talk about the Ravens and Joe Flacco, how he regressed this year, and when the game needed him, he wasn't necessarily readily available to pull this team and fight. Remember, this was a team that was a missed field goal away, or a drop ball by Lee Evans, or a missed field goal by Billy Cundiff away from going to the Super Bowl and possibly winning the Super Bowl the way they were playing. And they just haven't been able. Now, they've had some injuries at some key spots, obviously Ray Lewis, but they haven't been able to get the quarterback play that they desire. And you wonder, you know, if they're going to go in a different direction or what they'll do there. But that's just one little problem that I had with that division, or one little storyline there, is what happened to Flacco. The next division is the AFC South. And, you know, another rookie that kicked the door in, the first overall pick in the NFL draft, was Andrew Luck. And he's been an awesome player. He's been exactly what the scouts said he would be. He's been exactly what he was since his freshman year. He's been a player that's going to throw for 4,000 yards as a rookie. I think he already has 4,000 already, but he's going to throw for over 4,000 yards. And really hit the ground running over there. Now, I don't know if they're going to make the playoffs this year, but they're going to be close, and they are in contention, the Indianapolis Colts. But obviously, an unbelievable start to a rookie season. And you know, when you're past the torch from Peyton Manning, you know, I'm sure there's not a lot of people over there crying about Peyton Manning. And I'm a Yankee fan, and I remember when Don Mattingly left, Tino Martinez kind of came in, and we thought we'd never be able to replace Don Mattingly. And once Tino Martinez came in and played as well as he played, nobody even thought about Don Mattingly. I mean, you know, not that Tino Martinez was a better player, but he just played so well that no one thought about it. You know, Andrew Luck kind of has that same kind of, you know, people aren't crying over Peyton Manning leaving the Colts anymore. So, especially now that they have a chance to make the playoffs. The next division I'm going to talk about, which is the final division, is the AFC West. And speaking of Peyton Manning, the Denver Broncos have played magnificently with him. And it looks like they made a brilliant off-season coaching decision. And a lot of people, including myself, were worried about the injury to Peyton's neck. And he seemed to obviously he started out slow in the beginning. Then he seemed to pick up steam, and his timing and everything else has been on point. Peyton Manning is, if I were to tell you that he was the best quarterback in the National Football League, you know, you would be able to argue only a little bit, because he's just as good as any other quarterback that's played the game. He's proven that to you by his demeanor. He's proven that to you by his play, and his fight, his resiliency. I mean, the injury that he had, not too many guys are going to play with a neck surgery at the quarterback position. Now, you think about like Roethlisberger. Roethlisberger lost a few games. He got injured, missed a few games for the Pittsburgh Steelers. When he came back, the next game he was rusty. And it looked like he's still trying to get some of that rust out from missing games. I mean, Manning missed the whole season, you know, and it's just unbelievable that he's been able to come in and play at that level. And some people even saying that he might play at an MVP level. So, one of the speaking of MVPs, I got a list of MVP candidates, and then my favorites to actually, you know, my favorite, who I believe is the MVP. People will tell you that there's other choices out there, and they'll tell you they have reasons for who they want, and we'll talk about that. I'm going to tell you exactly who I believe is the MVP and why. Some of the candidates are Peyton Manning, Adrian Peterson, Tom Brady, Calvin Johnson, Aldon Smith, J.J. Watt, RG3. These are the most popular players that have been rumored for the MVP. And Peyton Manning is obviously a media darling because he's coming back and playing at a high level from a huge injury. My pick on the my choice on the MVP, and if it is going to be Adrian Peterson, hands down. Now, if Adrian Peterson breaks the rushing record, it's no question to me, and I'll explain why. If he rushes for 2,000 yards, I still think he should win. Now, here's my reason why. When people describe the National Football League, what kind of league do they say it is? They say it's a passing league. That's what everyone says. This is a passing league. So, if it's a passing league and it's a wide receiver league, then the league is obviously set up, and we know by the rules, the rule changes. Now you can't touch wide receivers, you can't bump them after this amount of yards and that yards, you can't put your hands on them, and every time you go to hit a wide receiver, it's a defenseless wide receiver flag getting thrown. Everything is set up for you to allow the wide receiver to catch the ball, and points scored, points generated, etc. Your quarterback is benefiting from this style of play, as is your wide receiver. If it's a passing league, then guess what it can't be? If it's a quarterback league, then it can't be a running back league. If it's a passing league, then it can't be a rushing league. But guess what? For the Minnesota Vikings, it is. Adrian Peterson is defying the way the game is being thought to be played. So now I know Aldon Smith, he has a chance, along with J.J. Watt, to break the sack record. And even if they do that, that's fine and dandy. Because it's a passing league, quarterbacks are throwing more. So there's more opportunities for you to get to the quarterback. And I'm not trying to denigrate or I'm not trying to put down the defensive player. But what Adrian Peterson is doing is we've never seen this kind of runner, especially off of the injury. So I think that because it's a passing league, the wide receivers and quarterbacks are benefited by that, not the running back. So Adrian Peterson, to me, is hands down the MVP of the league. Now, I'm going to pull up the last part of the show here in closing. And once again, if you disagree or have an opinion at all, definitely hit comments at the bottom of the page on this YouTube page, or you can email me at bootsports@yahoo.com. But I did have my random fan email, and I want to read that now and see if I can give some assessment to the email and see if we can break down and answer this. The email that I have is from Joe in Jersey. It says, in your opinion, if Christian Ponder is not the answer, should the Vikings look into the draft for a quarterback, or should we look at signing an established quarterback in the NFL already? So, it's a good question, because we mentioned, or I actually didn't mention, that what Adrian Peterson is doing right now without the quarterback play. I mean, his quarterback play has not been good at all this year. So guys are able to try to load up and stop Adrian Peterson, and Christian Ponder hasn't been able to make them pay. He hasn't been really good throwing a deep ball or anything like that. But Joe in Jersey asks a question. What can they do about it? Well, the organization's stance, and most organizations' stances when they draft their guy, is they will ride him until he just can't win anymore, a la the Jets and Mark Sanchez. They kept watching this guy throw interception after interception after interception because they have to prove that they were right in making that choice. They have to prove it. They traded up spots to get him, just like the Minnesota Vikings traded up to get Christian Ponder. I think it was 13th pick overall. Now, that being said, if they decide that they don't want to go with Christian Ponder and they want to look in a direction, now I know I've heard all the talks about the quarterbacks that are going to be available next year, Michael Vick, maybe Kevin Cobb. Matt Flynn will be available via trade. Alex Smith will be available via trade. You know, that's provided these guys don't get cut, you know, due to some salary cap implications. There's going to be a boatload of quarterbacks that are going to be available. Not that they're going to be great, but I got one that not too many people are talking about. I mentioned him earlier, and it might be a good idea. Joe Flacco for the Baltimore Ravens is in a contract year this year. Speaking of that, he's not playing well, but he has shown that he can play very well, and showed that last year and previous years that he's a very solid quarterback. Has just as good an arm as anybody in the National Football League. Always had a big arm coming out of Delaware State. Coming out of Delaware. If the Minnesota Vikings could invest and offer some money to Joe Flacco, he would be able to stretch that field. Now, the Minnesota Vikings have some decent wide receivers. Percy Harvin is an awesome player. But he doesn't have a quarterback that's getting him the deep ball. The Minnesota Vikings drafted Greg Childs. They drafted Jarius Wright. They got Jerome Simpson. They have some guys, including the second-year player Kyle Rudolph, the tight end from Notre Dame. They got some players that, if they had a big-armed quarterback, would be able to show how explosive their offense can be, especially with a player as dynamic as Adrian Peterson. So that's something I would look into. Get me a veteran that can actually teach Christian Ponder how to be an NFL pro, what to look for, and at the same time, you still got a young quarterback in Flacco who might not have seen his ceiling yet. That might be a name that you might want to push for if you're a Viking fan and you want to see an improved quarterback play next year. Okay, so think about that. Do some research on that guy. Look at him. He is in a big, erect figure back there. It's about 6'6", and he's mobile, a lot more mobile than he gets credit for. He could be a guy that could change the whole complexion of your offense. So thanks for emailing in, Joe, in Jersey. Also, I want to give thanks to one more guy, my buddy, Dwayne Green. You can follow him on Twitter. He's another big Cowboy fan. Mosberg, it's at Mosberg, Mozzberg on Twitter. Also, he's been giving insight and some tips, so I do appreciate him. I'm sure he'll be emailing into bootsports@yahoo.com. Definitely click like, definitely subscribe. If you have a page, subscribe. Just click the subscription page. I do appreciate, once again, everybody for tuning in and listening to the show. I'll be doing another show, my little Dallas Cowboys show, probably tomorrow. My pregame show as we head into the Saints. We head into that game. So, once again, thanks for the random fan mail. And also, thanks for tuning into my show and listening. Hopefully you all enjoyed. I'm your host, Uncle Bootz. I'm out of here.